11. The source of law. With the Enlightenment, scientism began to govern men's minds and reorder society. One of its premises was the faith that reason being inherent in all the natural universe, the laws of reason would thus ensure an orderly society. Brune called attention to the belief of the philosophers. Men in society, no less than bodies in space, were subject to rational principles. The formulation of these was to be the miracle which would bring harmony out of chaos. Since the new legal formulas would possess the same lucidity and command the same acceptance as the axioms of Euclid, they would establish in the affairs of government a mathematical precision. This miscalculation, this confusion of juristic with scientific law, could only have occurred in a century obsessed, like the 18th, with the triumphs of mathematics. It made society, as Mably had pointed out, a branch of physics. Exactly so. And because society became a branch of physics, and a rational Newtonian order was held to prevail in all being, certain consequences followed. First, while philosophy divided into rationalistic and empiricist camps, the two began with a common premise, a Cartesian one. Man's self-consciousness was for both the ultimate point of reference, that is, man the thinker, man the empirical observer. Philosophers disagreed as to the relative importance of reason versus the senses, but they were agreed that Descartes' autonomous man was ultimate, and this autonomous man they saw as the ultimate and decisive reason and observer. Second, their view of law as similar to physics meant that mankind as a whole is not unlike any other concatenation of atoms. It is a vast, impersonal realm of social atoms which needs scientific ordering. Historians are so enamored with the high-sounding expressions of Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers that they neglect to note the horrors those eras brought to the common man. The common man was less and less seen either as Christian man, or at least a being created in the image of God, and more seen as a social atom. In fact, man was now to be understood not as God's image-bearer, but in terms of the laws of human nature. Especially after Hegel and Darwin, the laws of human nature were seen in physical and biological terms. Van Til showed that man has been explained by reference to his ostensibly evolutionary past, the man in terms of the child in terms of an animal ancestry, and steadily on backwards. Child psychology explains the man and so on backward in what Van Til termed an integration into the void. In contrast with this, the Christian view, the modern concept of the integration of personality is an integration into the void. We can best appreciate this if we note that the concept purpose itself has been completely internalized. Heinemann says, in the same connection in which he brings out that, according to Freudianism, the soul has become a Vitalseele, that Freud has willy-nilly to recognize the Sinnhaftigkeit des psychovitalen Geschehens. By that, he means that the idea of purpose itself is something non-rational. All this has led to the dehumanization of man, which has marked the 20th century. Man, as a social atom, will, in time, if such thinking continues, have no more rights than any of Newton's atoms. Third, this scientism logically holds that, because Christian man, Christianity and the Church are by definition irrational, they have no place in a scientific society. The 19th century liberal politician August Ludwig von Wachau, in his Grundsätzen der Realpolitik, 1853, was, like other liberals, an advocate of general toleration. However, pragmatically and historically variable as those limits may have been at the time, a hard fact remained, as Shida noted. It was only within the framework of the great basic convictions of liberalism that it was thought possible to hold tactically diverse views in detail, and party division and parties were permissible only within the intellectual and political scope delimited by these convictions. Given this perspective, it follows logically that anthropologist Edmund Leach, in an article titled "We Scientists Have the Right to Play God," should hold, "There can be no source for moral judgment except the scientist himself." If nature replaces God as the source of law, then man must adapt to nature, which means, in part, adapting to himself. In the words of the then Queen Professor of Comparative Law in the University of London in the 1920s, adaptation to environment is the basic necessity, and the individual man finds the means of adaptation, which we may call natural human law, intuitively and inseparably interwoven with his consciousness. Where man, rather than nature, becomes the source of law, it still means integration downward. Instead of obeying God's law, seeing law as above and over us, law becomes something we express and determine in terms of adaptation to our own natural being. This, then, is alone true law. Christianity and the Bible become then alien to the true and natural order. According to Francis Ellingwood Abbott in his 9 Demands of Liberalism, 1873, the tax-exempt status of churches should be revoked, chaplains should be dropped from Congress, prisons and the military, all Sabbath observances should be repealed, and no laws should express Christian morality. Blau held that rights exist only for individuals. Some rights entail the right to organize, which means religious freedom. However, just as the state and all its agencies are committed to an indifference to the religious beliefs of individuals, save where the belief issues in a practice that is socially undesirable, the state is committed to the strictest neutrality as far as the religious associations are concerned. Again, with the same reservation. This must not, however, be considered as a right of the churches as such. It is rather the fulfillment of the rights of the individuals composing the churches. No organization as such can have rights save by legal fiction. It may be considered to have the rights of an individual under the law, but it cannot be considered to have rights above the law. In any other sense than this, it is absurd to talk about the rights of an association. The individual conscience may, in certain respects, be granted a position of privileges above the law, an immunity against authority. An association, even though it be a church, may not be granted such special privilege. Blau spoke of the illegitimate extension of individual freedom to organizational freedom. For Blau, only the individual has authority, and that authority is delegated essentially to the state. For him, religion is a personal matter. Religion, for him, is supernatural, biblical faith, not his militant humanism. It is, quote, the separation between religion and government, end quote. Given this separation, it follows that Christians have no right to seek anything in the way of Christian legislation. This is, of course, a widespread current view. Humanists are seen as free to express pro-abortion, pro-homosexual, and anti-Christian views, and to seek legislation to further their faith. For Christians to express themselves against abortion and homosexuality, or for capital punishment, is held by many to be a violation of the separation of church and state. They insist on reading the First Amendment as a restraint upon Christianity rather than upon civil government. Men like Blau oppose anything which smacks of biblical law and regard it as tyranny, yet at the same time they seek to impose a muzzle on Christians. If man and the state are the true source of law, it then follows logically that no law from God has any standing in society and will be seen as alien to, quote, liberty, end quote, and just as Stalin sought to deliver the Soviet Union from the supposed tyranny of the Christians, so too, in time, all democratic societies will move against any supernatural source of law and all advocates of God's law. Indeed, in the name of democracy, they have been doing so. In Orwellian language, these men declare that tyranny and persecution are expressions of freedom. The source of law in any society is the God of that social order. The new God is the state, the modern Moloch, and he demands human sacrifices,